Hey everyone, and welcome to Reform Thinking. Today we're going to jump into a really key argument from C.S. Lewis. He looks at the search for meaning almost like a detective story, and he claims there's one central clue that points to the truth of the universe. So let's dive in.
All right, so this is the big one, isn't it? It's a question that, thinking people have asked forever. What is all this stuff around us? And how in the world did it get here? This is the starting point for the whole investigation. So Lewis sets this whole thing up like a detective story. He says there are really only two main lines of thought, two main suspects, you could say. And to figure out which one is right, we've got to find a very specific clue, one that you just can't find by looking at things from the outside.
Okay, so here they are, our two main suspects. On one side, you've got the materialist view. It basically says everything is here by accident. On the other, the religious view, which says nope, there's a mind, a purpose, behind the whole shebang. These are really the two primary ways people have tried to make sense of it all.
All right, let's dig into the first suspect a little closer. The materialist view says that matter and space, well, that's all there is. They just exist, and no one really has a reason why. From that starting point, everything else, including you and me, is just the result of a super long chain of cosmic accidents.
And Lewis, he really hones in on this phrase, a sort of fluke, to get at the heart of the materialist position on humanity. From this perspective, we're not the main event, not at all. We're just an unexpected random byproduct of matter doing its thing over billions of years.
Okay, now for the other side of the coin. The religious views suggest that the reality behind everything isn't mindless matter, but something much more like a mind, that it's actually conscious and it has intentions. This is a completely different starting block for understanding everything.
So, what does this mind-like power actually look like? Well, according to this view, it's conscious, not just some blind force. It has goals, it has preferences, it's not just neutral about how things turn out. And a major purpose was to create beings like itself, at least in the sense that they also have minds.
And this is where the investigation really gets interesting. We have these two competing ideas about everything. And, our number one tool for figuring out the world is science. So the question is, can science actually settle this for us?
Well, Lewis points out that science has a pretty specific job. Its whole method is observation, it sets up experiments, it watches what happens, and it writes down the results. It's all about what physical stuff does.
Yeah, and if you think about it, every single scientific statement, no matter how complex it sounds, really just boils down to this. I did X, and then Y happened. It's a great tool for describing what happens in the universe, but it can't tell you why there's a universe in the first place.
And that right there is the key limitation. Science is absolutely fantastic at answering how questions. How does gravity work? How do our cells divide? But those questions we started with, why is there a universe, and does it have a purpose, are just outside its lane. It's like science can watch the play and describe every single scene, but it can't tell you if there was a playwright who wrote it.
This is such a great way to think about it. If there is a creative power behind the universe, you wouldn't expect to find it as just another object inside the universe. You could analyze every single brick, every wire, every pipe in a house, but you will never, ever find the architect that way. The architect is on a totally different level than the building. So you might be thinking, okay, if we can't find the answer by looking at stuff from the outside, then I guess that's it. Case closed, right? But Lewis says, not so fast. There's a twist. There is one single thing in the whole universe that we know about in a different way. And here it is, the big clue. The one exception is us. We have inside information on what it's like to be human, simply because we are human. We know things about ourselves that an outside observer could never figure out just by watching us. So, what is this inside scoop we have? It's the moral law. Think about a stone. It follows the law of gravity. That law just describes what a stone always does. But for us, it's different. We live under a law that tells us what we ought to do even when we really don't want to. And we have this deep sense that this law is real, not just something we made up.
So this gut feeling of right and wrong, this sense that we're supposed to behave a certain way, even if we didn't invent the rules, that is the key piece of evidence. It kind of feels like we're operating under some kind of command, doesn't it?
Lewis has another great analogy for this. He says it's like being a postman. You can't open the mail meant for other people, you can only see the addresses. The only package you're allowed to open is your own. And when we look inside that packet, when we look inside ourselves, we find this moral law, this sense that we're accountable to something.
Okay, so before he wraps this up, Lewis tackles a third idea some people throw out there. It's sort of a middle ground position, this life force idea. The idea is that there's some kind of striving force driving evolution, but it's blind. It's not a mind.
And Lewis, well, he doesn't pull any punches on this one. He basically says, look, if this life force has a mind, then you're just calling God by a different name. And if it doesn't have a mind, then how can it strive for anything? He calls it a tame God. You get all the warm, fuzzy feelings of religion without any of the actual responsibility.
So if we set that idea aside, Lewis brings it back to the main clue, the moral law. And he says it points in a very specific direction. It points to a director, a guide, some kind of power behind all the facts we can see and measure.
Okay, so let's just recap where this first part of the argument has taken us. 1, there seems to be some kind of directing force in the universe. 2, we experience this force inside ourselves as the moral law. 3, because it gives us directions, it has to be more like a mind than like a rock. But here's a really critical point. This is as far as this particular argument goes. It doesn't get you all the way to the God of Christian theology, not yet. It just gets you to a something behind it all.
So our investigation has pointed us to a director. But, just finding out there's someone in charge is really only the first step. The really big question now is, what is this director like? Is it good? Is it something we should be afraid of? And that, well, that's where the next part of the investigation would have to begin.